Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. I just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers snapped their two-game skid to beat the Philadelphia 76ers 116-106. They improved to 5-4 overall and 4-0 at home. It was a much-needed win, and it was not without a notable update. The Lakers made a big starting lineup change, inserting Cam Reddish and moving D'Angelo Russell to the bench. It's something that I've talked about on here over the last week and a half or so. I've talked about it on my podcast, Buha's Block, as well. Felt like it was trending in this direction. Did not expect Cam Reddish to be the starter as recently as a few games ago, but he had two impressive games off the bench and earned that spot and played his way into a bigger role. And I think for the most part, it looked pretty good for the Lakers. So let's just get into the three takeaways for today's show, and then we will get into our Q&A portion. As always, quick reminder, those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. So the Lakers, takeaway number one is the Lakers make a big starting lineup change, and it worked. And as I've covered on here, it felt like this was the way that things were trending because D'Angelo Russell had become the fifth option in the starting lineup over the first 8 games or so. And he did have a couple of good performances, but for the most part was struggling. It was averaging 12 points a game, fifth on the team in shots, and I believe was under 40% shooting overall and under 30% shooting on threes. So he was not playing or shooting at his normal percentages. He did not look like himself. And because the Lakers are so offensive leaning with that starting lineup, it's their 5 best players and 5 best scorers, someone was going to get squeezed. And last season at times it was Austin or it was Rui, and D'Lo was more of the number 3 guy until the playoffs. But this year, with the way that the Lakers were empowering Austin, running more of the offense through him, having him bring the ball up and run more 3-man actions with AD and with LeBron, D'Lo was the guy who was marginalized. And as I've talked about on here before, D'Lo is a very rhythm-based player, and he's a guy who he's not the type of guy who can just go 3-4 minutes or even a few possessions without touching the ball, without having something run for him, and then just catch a end of shot clock swing pass and nail the shot. Like he's just not been that type of player, at least with the Lakers. So he's a guy who needs to touch the ball, who needs to run the offense. JJ even mentioned it pregame before we knew that the starting lineup change was going to be happening, but just that D'Lo is a pick and roll player, a guy who is best with the ball in his hands, and the Lakers have been trying to find more ways for him to have the ball in his hands. So moving D'Lo to the bench, it adds some offensive pop, some offensive juice to the bench unit. Already he had 18 points, which was tied with Dalton for the most points scored by a bench player this season, and Dalton did most of that in garbage time in Cleveland. So really, this was the highest scoring bench performance by a Laker this season, and it made sense. It just, like, D'Lo at this point of his career, I think is a little bit more in that Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, Jordan Clarkson, type player and type role with this team. And you saw it tonight. He had 3 assists, took 12 shots, which was the 4th most on the team. So took more shots than Rui. But I feel like he was much more aggressive. Like the first play of the game, he comes in, he drives right at the rim. So he finishes with 13 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists. Did have a couple turnovers, and I felt like The decision making was still a bit up and down. There's too many times where he's just flinging, like he had the layup attempt at the end of the first half that he could have, taken a proper floater or actually gotten the layup, and he just flung up some wild attempt that missed. But he's had several of those, or he had several of those tonight. And also I think his 2 turnovers came by trying to dribble through a crowd, and he's just someone who, when he's being hounded, can really struggle to kind of navigate that. And I felt like Philly's ball pressure was able to disrupt him a little bit. But overall, I think a solid performance from D'Lo. This was one of his better games of the season, certainly one of his better offensive games of the season. 7 for 12 shooting, 2 for 4 from deep. Got to the free throw line 3 times. So I think this role makes the most sense for D'Lo. And really what it did for the starting lineup with Cam Reddish was, it allowed Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura to slide down the pecking order in terms of defensive matchups. And that's what the Lakers have really been missing with that starting lineup. Is it's been whoever's the best wing size guy, Rui Hachimura has to guard that guy. Whoever's the best backcourt scorer, Austin Reeves has to guard that guy. Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, like go down the list, and Austin Reeves has had to guard all those guys. But putting in Cam, because he is so good defensively and also so versatile defensively, like I think he's actually best defending backcourt guys, but he can, with that like 6'7", 6'8" frame, defend some threes as well. He can take on those assignments. And that I think you saw with Austin. Austin had one of his better games of the season, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, and not having to take on the Paul George assignment, which probably would have been Rui actually, but just even Austin being able to guard, Kyle Lowry some, or even Kelly Oubre, who was not have a good game, or like he was just able to not guard the primary shot creator, ball handler. And I thought that did wonders for Austin's game in terms of just saving his legs, because he's been, Crane just had a tweet about it where Austin's one of the only guys who's been such a high usage player, but also taking on, tough defensive assignments, like basically tier 1 scorers. And Austin, in his database and the different stats they have over there at B-Ball Index, based on certain metrics and percentiles, like Austin was basically the guy in the league with the hardest 2-way workload, which based on the murderer's row of perimeter guys he's had to guard, it checks out. It makes sense. So I think Austin and Rui both not having to guard the top perimeter scorer now, and both of those guys being able to focus more on their scoring and then doing the little things. And obviously most teams have 2 to 3 good perimeter scorers or offensive threats. So it's not like Austin and Rui are getting off nights by any means, but still putting that primary assignment on Cam Reddish, I think is it just does a lot for the starting lineup. And I think Cam played really well. Only took 1 shot. JJ shouted that out post game of like, they don't really want Cam shooting. Like he's at this point of his NBA career, he's not much of an offensive threat. Only took 1. His 1 shot attempt was a 3. He made it. It was in the first quarter, but had 5 rebounds again. So he continues to prove me wrong with the rebounding, and he's rebounded well. Had a couple of assists, had a steal, had a block. And I think like did have a charge, and that's where, again, like when he puts the ball on the floor, bad things tend to happen. So he tried to, I forgot if it was attacking a closeout or it was just a swing pass, but he tried to drive and got a charge. And like I would like to, like, if we're nitpicking, I'd like to maybe see him not do that as much, but he did cut it out, right? Like he only took 1 shot, and he's really been a low usage player since this stint of the last few games. So Cam he held Paul George to 4-13 shooting. I do think Paul George looks a bit rusty. He was on a minutes restriction, so I don't think that was entirely all Cam, but Cam was a big part of that. And Cam has looked really good defensively. He's really helped now the starting lineup, but just basically any lineup he's been in. So I think this I'm a little surprised with the timing of this lineup change. Like, I thought the Lakers would at least, like, they were going to be home for this Sixers game, then they're playing the Raptors on Sunday. I thought maybe they'd want to give the starting lineup like one final look against those two teams, two easier teams. And it was like, if they struggled against both of them, then it would kind of be like, okay, we beat the Sixers, we beat the Raptors, but we barely beat those teams. D'Lo, we're sorry, you got to move to the bench. But JJ, you got to give him credit. And I know some people are going to bring up Darvin Ham and Darvin making the adjustment from Austin to Cam at the beginning of last season. I would point to two things that are slightly different. One, I want to say the Lakers are 3-5, not 4-4, so that they were performing slightly worse to start the season. Another thing was I just fundamentally disagreed with benching Austin because this was a guy that the Lakers had said was their number 3 guy. Darvin had called him a future All-Star. They had been hyping him up. We heard a lot of the same stuff last preseason in terms of we're going to give Austin the ball more. We're going to, run more of the offense through him. And it was basically like pulling the plug on that 8 games in. And Austin did not have a good start to the season. He was banged up. He was coming off Team USA. It wasn't like he certainly was not performing up to expectation, and that's partly why he was benched. But another part of that, as I reported and as other people reported at the time, was the Lakers did not want to lose D'Angelo Russell. And it felt just kind of odd that a guy that they were trying to trade and didn't necessarily value long term was getting the start and sort of the role over a player that they were hyping up all offseason and saying that they wanted to empower. So that just never made sense to me. And then on top of that, at that time, Taurean Prince was starting over Rui Hachimura. So that's one, because people, Cam was the guy for Darvin to start, and now it's the same thing with JJ. But I would also say JJ was already ahead of Darvin by starting Rui Hachimura and just going with his best 5 players. And he did have the sample size of that lineup working last season, but Darvin going with Taurean over Rui, I think, was already a misstep to start the season. And then he compounded that by, okay, well, now I'm going to bench Austin because he's struggling, but D'Lo wasn't exactly playing great necessarily either. But it was also just like, I don't want to ruffle his feathers. I don't want him to check out. I don't want him to be upset. So we're going to move Austin to the bench and just kind of take advantage that he's going to be a better professional about it. And I just, that to me didn't make sense. That was something that I fundamentally disagreed with. I wrote about it, and I know, that it was something that internally not a lot of people disagreed with. They felt that D'Lo should have been the one coming off the bench. So I would say that there's some differences, in my opinion, between JJ making this move and Darvin making the move that he made. But if you want to disagree with that, that's totally fine. But I would just say, like, this again, I thought this was the way that this was trending. I was a bit surprised it happened so soon. And for Cam to go from 3 games ago, he's the Cleveland game, he's a garbage time guy, and that's his first shift of the season. And then a few games later, he's now starting and playing 28 minutes and getting the Paul George assignment. Cam Reddish has been really impressive, and he deserves, I've already said I was wrong a couple times on here, but Cam Reddish has been playing at a really high level defensively. And it's also a slight indictment on Gabe Vincent and Max Christie, because those were the 2 guys the Lakers wanted to fill that role of being that perimeter stopper. And I think, like, if they were not going to start D'Lo to start the season, it probably would have been Max who would have gotten this. So that shows, like, Max was basically played garbage time the last minute and a half. So Max has been phased out of the rotation. Gabe Vincent played just under 16 minutes. But those 2 guys have been so disappointing that Cam has already leapfrogged both of them, and it only took him 2 real games to do that. So Cam Reddish deserves all the praise. He earned this spot, and I think him starting, at least in the short term, makes a lot of sense. And D'Angelo Russell, I think this empowers him a bit more with more second unit looks. And I think you saw, again, he was a bit more aggressive, played a bit. I don't love him playing with Gabe. That's the only thing. We saw some D'Lo, Gabe, Dalton. I just think you're too small and also not good enough defensively on the perimeter with that trio. So I would like to, honestly, I actually kind of think Max might deserve Gabe's role. If I'm going to nitpick the rotation, that I just think Max has actually been shooting better than Gabe for as poorly as Max has been playing. Statistically, he's been better than Gabe. He's also bigger than Gabe. He's more athletic than Gabe, and he's a better rebounder than Gabe. So I think I'd actually lean more toward Max being the ninth man and maybe Gabe just being out of the rotation. But it seems like Gabe has earned a certain level of trust, and he's probably going to continue being in the rotation. Now, my takeaway number 2 is longer term. I think this opens the door both for it makes it a little bit easier to trade D'Angelo Russell because now he's no longer a starter. He's clearly your 5th most important offensive player, and the Lakers have sort of he played fewer minutes than any starter. And for some reason, Austin didn't close this game, but the game was basically already sealed. So I think that I talked about that earlier in the season of like moving D'Lo to the bench just allows it to be an easier transition where you're not as reliant on him. And now I think the Lakers have 4 locked in starters, and it's really that 5th spot that could be potentially upgraded in a trade. And whether it's a trade or Jared Vanderbilt coming back, now it was something I talked about on the last episode of Buha's Block was, do the Lakers just go to Austin, Vando, Rui, LeBron, and AD? It's a big lineup. It's a funky lineup, but Vando basically just does everything Cam does, but better. And he's a better rebounder. He's a better passer, a better ball handler, a better decision maker. I would say the one thing Cam's better at is shooting, which does matter from that role. But maybe you go and also if you're going to be switching, it's a bit easier. Like you can easily switch Vando, Rui, LeBron, AD. All those guys can kind of switch across those 4 positions. Austin, I think you probably got to be a little bit more selective with. But right now, they've already been switching 1 through 4 with Austin on the floor. So it kind of just fits in seamlessly. So I wonder if when Vando eventually comes back and we're due for an update, and it's something that I plan on asking soon here is probably Sunday. Like, what's up with Vando? What's up with Christian Wood? We haven't gotten any updates on either of those guys. If Vando comes back relatively soon, I think he probably will start, for first few games coming off the bench and play, ramp up 12, 15, 18 to 20 minutes. But with this shift now, I think this opens the door for Vando to potentially start. And I know it's on paper, it's a weird lineup. It's kind of funky, but if you're starting Cam, I think you just start the, upgrade from JV to varsity and go to Vando. And Vando helps obviously with your perimeter defense, but he's also a really good rebounder. And then with, again, I think with the switching there, he's just a bigger body and can, I think really help LeBron and AD. So I think that's like, I will give JJ credit for pulling the trigger on this when he did, coming off of a road trip. And again, I think having a couple of easy matchups, he could have played it safe and been like, let's just get the starters' confidence back. Let's get D'Lo's confidence back. And let's see if we can kind of ride this out a little bit longer before we have to make a change. But he realized on the road trip, like the starting lineup was just in Cleveland, in Phoenix, in parts of the game, in Detroit, in Toronto in the second half. Like this group was getting attacked defensively, particularly in the backcourt, and the Austin D'Lo pairing needed to be split up. And Austin has simply been better than D'Lo to start the season. He surpassed him as the number 3 option, and it made more sense to shift D'Lo to a 6-man role. So I think everyone was shouting them out after the game, shouting out D'Lo's sacrifice. D'Lo talked about it, said that he's egoless and he left his baggage at the door this summer once the coaching change happened, and that he's just trying to win. Didn't seem to be in the best mood for whatever that's worth, but that's also kind of how D'Lo can be sometimes. So, but he said all the right things, and obviously he embraced it. He didn't seem to be pouting. I thought the defensive effort was better. Still some mistakes in terms of rotations or transition or whatever, but I thought the effort was certainly better than the Memphis game was upon rewatching it, seeing some of the viral clips, the Memphis defensive effort was like inexcusable. And JJ claims he did not bench D'Lo because of that. But if he did, I would not blame him because there were some egregious defensive errors from D'Lo in that game, and really just a lot of lack of effort, like mental stuff that, especially in a night when AD and Rui are out, you would expect more from D'Lo in that type of setting. So those are my two like main takeaways from the game. The third thing I will say is, so AD has another 30-point game. It's just basically you could put it in pen. AD is going to drop 30 plus. Continues to be a monster. 31 points, 9 rebounds, 4 blocks. We'll also say LeBron had a good game, triple double, 21 points, 12 assists. 12 rebounds, 13 assists. But AD 30 points, 11 to 20 shooting. But the one thing that says a mini red flag is we talked to him after the game and confirmed that it is plantar fasciitis that he's dealing with in that left foot. And it's really just going to be something that he has to manage. And it's a pain tolerance thing. And he said it did hurt during the game. And he's really trying to figure out ways to manage it within the game and to kind of keep off of it. On off days, they're now trying to keep him off of it and not aggravate it and just rest it. So this is something that he's going to have to deal with. And I would say, like, we saw how bad the Memphis performance was from like a defensive rebounding, rim protection standpoint, but then also even offensively, I thought they became way too perimeter oriented and just jacking up a bunch of threes and playing wild, reckless basketball at times. This is just something to kind of like, AD's gonna have to deal with this, and I think the fear would be obviously it being aggravated to the point that he has to miss time, or maybe because he's compensating physically on that side of it. Kind of, sometimes when you have an injury, it leads to another injury where you're not trying to put too much pressure on like the left side of your body. You're subconsciously or even consciously sort of leaning more on the right side, and then that leads to a different type of injury. So I would just say like the plantar, like I hadn't talked about it yet because the injury update came out since after the last show. So I would just say like that is a tough injury, and hearing AD talk about it and him being through pain, like he said he's good, he's going to keep playing, but that's just like a little, I would say, like mini red flag is just now this situation that AD has to deal with, because that is a nagging injury that could potentially get worse and or again lead to potentially a different lower extremity injury. So that's a bit of bad news. I mean, you couldn't really tell because again, 31, 9, and 4 blocks, like AD pretty much look like the same player, but I just like that. That's a little bit of a concern, I think, moving forward, is like how does he navigate that? And we know a big thing for him has been his conditioning and him staying. And there are ways that you can do the bike or different things that aren't putting pressure necessarily on your foot, but him not necessarily being able to go as hard in practice and resting a lot more. I think there's just a chance that compounds into something at some point, or just him not, maybe it's as simple as him not being in as good of condition with just the lack of running and we'll see. I mean, I'd like to get a little bit more clarity from JJ and AD in terms of, does that mean he's not scrimmaging on off days now? And the Lakers, I mean, teams don't practice as much as they used to, but the Lakers have actually been practicing a little bit more, like they're practicing tomorrow. So like I'd be curious to hear what are AD's limitations now in practice, and like, is there any concern about this leading to a different type of injury, or just him not being as good of conditioning or shape or whatever? But that's the only like thing that I think was worth talking about in terms of like an injury update. No updates on Vando or Christian, but this was a good win for the Lakers. They shot really well, 52% overall, hit 16 threes, didn't get to the free throw line that much. We're actually outshot by 9 at the free throw line and still won the game. Took care of the ball, only 11 turnovers, 28 assists. And yeah, I mean, didn't force many turnovers. That would be another thing defensively. Philly had only 5 turnovers. They also had 19 fast break points. So that's an improvement for the Lakers. Still not good, but it's an improvement. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A portion. So I am seeing game time 206. Why do people want Kessler this bad? So I guess there's a Kessler conversation going on in the chat that I am not privy to. I will say, I mean, Kessler, I'll pull up his averages right now. Kessler, I believe, has been having a pretty good season. He's still on a team-friendly deal, legit 7-footer. Yeah, so this season he's averaging 9.5 points, 11.4 rebounds, and 3 blocks a game, shooting 68% from the floor. So if anything, I think Kessler has played himself into, I still don't think he's quite worth 2 first-round picks, but I think if I'm the Lakers, I would do a first-round pick and remove the protection because they owe Utah that 2027 pick. Or actually, it's rerouted to Atlanta. Is that Atlanta or is it? Yeah, I think it got rerouted to Atlanta if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, that's New Orleans pick got rerouted. I'm misspeaking here. New Orleans 2025 pick the Lakers owe the Pelicans the 2025 pick. They used it in the DeJounte Murray trade. So that's actually going to Atlanta, not New Orleans. But 2027, that's going to Utah, but it's top 4 protected. So if I'm the Lakers and I could do Jalen Hood-Schifino and a first round pick, 2029 or 2031, and remove that protection, so Utah has it completely unprotected in 2027, I would do that. I don't think I would. The Lakers have multiple swaps they could throw away, and they have multiple second round picks. Like maybe if it really came down to it, I'd throw in a second. I don't think I'd go more than that. I would not do 2 firsts for Walker Kessler. But Walker Kessler, I think would be a really good fit. He's basically been a double-double guy all season. 3 blocks a game, one of the best rim protectors in the league. I think he'd be a really nice fit. I probably would bring him off the bench, but I would make him I would kind of restructure the rotation where it's like, you know, you're going with the starters of, let's say it's the starting lineup tonight or Vando in Cam's spot, and then D'Lo, Kessler, Cam or Vando, whoever's not starting, and then like Dalton, and that's your 9-man rotation. And D'Lo and Kessler are both playing like 20 plus minutes a night, and then the rest of the guys are kind of in that like mid-teens. And that to me is like a really, really solid 9-man rotation. You could play him next to AD. You could play him as the lone big. You could even play him next to Christian Wood if you want to expand the rotation to 10, or Jackson Hayes, although the spacing gets a little mucked up there. So I'd prefer him next to like Christian Wood. But I think Walker Kessler is really good. He's really young. He's still on his rookie deal. And I think the most I would give up if I'm the Lakers is that one of the 2 firsts and then remove the protection. Okay, super chat here from Matthew. Thank you for the super chat. Got a trade for you. Lakers get Lopez. Milwaukee gets Hachimura and Beasley. Detroit gets Vincent, JHS, and a pick. I'm assuming this is one of the Lakers' first round picks, or it's unspecified. Lakers get $8.8 million under first apron. Starters: Lopez, AD, Braun, Reddish, Austin. Bench: Wood, Vando, Connect, Christie, Russell. Okay, so Vincent and Rui are out, and that's why you have Christie in the rotation, and then Lopez starts because Rui's no longer there. For the Lakers, I like it. Again, I don't know which pick. So I'm higher on Brook Lopez than some people. I see some people in the chat saying no. It's tricky. I don't think I'd give up a first, although you probably have to give up a first for him. So I don't know if Matthew, if you could provide context as to what pick I'm assuming you're saying the Lakers, one of the Lakers first. So the one thing with going with Lopez is it does dramatically change the defense. Like, yes, you are adding a rim protector, but you have to play drop defense with Brook Lopez. I personally, I'd actually like if there's a way to not do Rui and maybe do like Vando or D'Lo, I would prefer that. And then I'd prefer actually you kind of stick with the Rui, 80, LeBron, but then bring Lopez off the bench. But I'm personally not against this deal. One thing with Milwaukee is they just had Malik Beasley, and I mean, I haven't followed the situation closely, but I don't think it went like great to close the season. So I don't know how they'd feel about that. Detroit, you're just taking on Vincent for the money. You're taking on the pick. You're taking on JHS as like a development project. So, I mean, I don't think this is a crazy deal. I think it just depends. I'm viewing Vincent with the way he's played and with the money he's owed. That's a negative asset. JHS is a negative asset. So it's really Rui and a pick for Lopez. And I don't know. That's interesting. It does change the way, like, without having a crystal ball, like I want to kind of know like what Rui looks like the rest of the season, but I'm iffy on it. I'm leaning toward a slight yes, but it's a very like you're just kind of going all in on this season type move, which I do think the Lakers should do it. Now I'm seeing some people in the chat saying Milwaukee, like why would Milwaukee do it? Yeah, I mean Milwaukee probably. Well, that's the other thing here I'll say is like Milwaukee would probably want the pick if they're giving up Lopez, so that's the tricky part. So maybe Lakers send Milwaukee the first and Detroit gets a second or something. But yeah, I like the idea. I like Lopez on the Lakers. I don't know if I'd give up Rui for like I probably wouldn't want to give up Rui and a first. I'd fight for one of the two. And if I'm giving up Rui, I want to keep the first. If I'm giving up the first, I don't want to give up Rui. That would be my my thing. But yeah, seems like the chat's against it for what that's worth. Shabu Jin Gin, I need to know. Can you phonetically type in your name in the chat so I can get it right here? Where's the update on Christian Wood? So we're past the 8-week mark. It's something that, like I asked JJ, well, post game I asked JJ when he told D'Lo about the starting lineup change, and that was today. And then I also asked him about Cam going from out of the rotation to starting within a few games, and just like what he's seen from him defensively to make that type of impact to jump up and earn that spot. So I didn't ask about it post game, and then pre-game I asked JJ about the viral clip with D'Lo and if he had to like what his conversations with D'Lo have been like since the Memphis game, if he was aware of that viral clip and his reaction to just that whole situation. So in both instances, I didn't ask about Christian. I felt like those questions were more timely and just more important to the night and covering the night. But Christian, I mean, there's practice tomorrow. I assume JJ will be asked tomorrow and we'll get some type of update. But the fact that there's been no update and we're past the 8-week mark when there's supposed to be an update by the 8-week mark or around the 8-week mark, I would take that as not a great sign. But again, the Lakers are typically very quiet with their injury updates. So, but, I mean, Christian could play Sunday for all we know, right? But I doubt it. But hopefully we'll have a better answer tomorrow. And thank you for the super chat. Okay. G like golf, not G like, okay. Okay, I got you. I'm seeing a question from Michael about Jackson Hayes. I have not heard anything on the Hayes front in terms of the legal process. I've just heard that he and his team and the Lakers are cooperating with the league and so in terms of dropping him, I think it would have to be some type of like major suspension. But I still think even with the CBA rules, I don't think the Lakers could just drop him and it would still count on the cap. So I don't think they're getting out of that contract. Dark Galaxy. Jovan, you mentioned before today's game that you had seen some positive in Gabe's defense. What's the positive you've been seeing? Because I don't see any. So I think Gabe is fine on point guards, and especially like he's typically guarding backup point guards. And I think for the most part, that's fine. Where there's some issues with Gabe are, especially when the Lakers are switching, when he gets like KD was asking for that switch at the end of the Phoenix game in Phoenix, right? So teams, I don't like Gabe having to guard up. He's not one of those like I think about when I covered Patrick Beverley when he was with the Clippers, and he defended KD fairly well for a guy that size, and like he almost like they felt like he was actually better defending bigger players than smaller players. I would say Gabe Vincent's the opposite, where Gabe Vincent is fine against most point guards. He competes, but the guys who are either bigger than him or super athletic give him problems. And so like I feel like Gabe is a good team defender. Like he's often in the right spots in terms of rotations and like off ball communication and like navigating screens and stuff. Where he gets in, where there's a limitation there is like, again, if it's a Ja Morant, he's just way too athletic and explosive for Gabe. If he's switched onto a Kevin Durant, that guy's just going to shoot over him. Although KD can do that against basically anybody. So I think Gabe's been like solid defensively. I think sometimes he's been put in spots where, especially with the switching, that teams can pick on him, and he's just not good at defending up. And that's where I'm not as comfortable with him being part of the switching lineups, or at least maybe not switching. Maybe it's switching if AD's the 5, maybe it's switching 2 through 5 and not 1 through 4, and maybe making that tweak. But with all that said, I think now with D'Lo coming off the bench and basically being the backup point guard behind Austin, though he's not directly subbing in for Austin, I don't like Gabe as much in the rotation, just because now you're playing. There's I want to say 2 or 3 shifts where it was Gabe and D'Lo together, and I don't like that combination. I just think they're too small. And then if you throw in Dalton in there again, I just think you're both too small and not good enough defensively on the perimeter. So I would at least like to see if Gabe's going to stay in the rotation, you got to figure out a way to stagger him and D'Lo and make it more Gabe and Austin, and then D'Lo and Cam, or D'Lo and Dalton. And I like those backcourt combinations a bit more. So I would say that's why I just brought up a bit ago that I would actually probably like to see Max take Gabe's spot as like the 9th man and go with the starters, D'Lo, Jackson, Dalton, and Max. And at least that way, if it's Max and D'Lo, Max is better at guarding up than Gabe is. And he's honestly shot just as poorly. They've basically been neck and neck in terms of field goal percentage and 3-point percentage. So it's not like you're having some massive downgrade from an offensive perspective. If anything, I think Gabe's taken worse shots than Max, though Max did not have a good crunch time or garbage time tonight, excuse me. So, I mean, they're really struggling. Like even I think Dalton, because he's a rookie and because people like him, has kind of slid under the radar in terms of how much he struggled. But like tonight, he was 1 for 8. And he's been picked on defensively. He's not been good defensively, especially the rough Memphis game and then tonight. So I think Dalton, because like maybe because he's a rookie, the expectations are a little bit lower. Although I think a lot of people have high expectations for Dalton. He hasn't gotten the same flack as Max and Gabe, when like both guys have definitively been better than him defensively, and offensively. Dalton also had like the garbage time explosion in Cleveland that has carried some of his offensive numbers, where like you remove that game and just look at like competitive portions of games. Dalton has kind of been in line with Gabe and Max in terms of shooting struggles. And he's out there primarily for his offense and his shooting, where those guys are more out there for their energy and their defense. And they have not done the energy and defense parts as well as they could or should. So I'm not like, absolving them of blame. I just really think the Lakers have had a big bench problem, where like now D'Lo's coming off the bench, Cam's playing well, so they're kind of up to like 6 guys. Jackson had a good game, 4 blocks, 8 points. I thought was effective on both sides of the ball, but they've really struggled to have more than like 7 reliable guys on a given night, and that's a problem that they're going to need at least 8, if not 9, on most nights, especially against good teams. Okay, let's see. Dark Galaxy Connect gives you points, whereas the others don't. So yes, I will. Yes, but I will. I mean, if we look at Dalton's. I'm pulling up Dalton's game logs right now. So first game. I mean, so I'll just read through them quickly. 5, 8, 10, 0, 18. But remember, most of that might have been all of it, but most of it came in that fourth quarter where the Cleveland game was just over. 5, 5, 3. So Dalton has played, and then tonight he had 2. So Dalton has played 9 games. He's been in double digits twice, and one of them was a garbage time game that I personally don't count because like Dalton's scoring against Cleveland's third string, it was impressive. It was like it's better than some of the performances we've seen from JHS and Maxwell and those end of bench guys when they come in, right? But it was still like I'm judging Dalton in like the competitive portions of games that actually matter. And if you take away the Cleveland game, he's had one double digit game, and then if you so that, and then one game with 8. And then everything else has been 5 or less. So Dalton's really been like 33% shooting, 50, 40, 0, 29, 33, 1 for 1 game, then 14%. Then tonight was similarly like around 11%. So it's like Dalton's had a lot of rough shooting nights. And again, I would say at least with Gabe and Max are getting a baseline level of defense. Now, I'm not saying Dalton shouldn't play. I'm just saying he's kind of not gotten the same flack that those guys have gotten. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go about 5 to 10 more minutes here, and then I'm going to wrap because your boy is KO'd from the road trip. Adam Hurley, Gabe hurts us, Jovan. We usually dominate until he comes in. I'm not disagreeing. Like I'm making the case. I think Max should be in the rotation above Gabe. So I'm not. I feel like I'm coming off as a Gabe apologist when that's not my. Like someone like I made the case before. I made it in the last episode of Buha's Block with Kobe Price. Like I've seen, D'Lo needs to be benched, Jackson needs to be benched, Cam needs to be benched, or Cam shouldn't play, which obviously I was on that side and I was wrong. But Gabe needs to be benched. Max needs to be benched. And it's like someone's got to play. And then if you bench all those, if you bench even one of those guys, all of a sudden you're down to either an 8-man rotation, which is really hard to do on a. JJ's not Tibbs, and he should be because that wears out the players. But then you're down to JHS, Bronny, Koloko. I liked what we saw in Memphis, but I don't think he's quite ready for the rotation. I mean, Max Christie is out of the rotation, but maybe he's one of the guys you're benching. And Maxwell Lewis, obviously Vando and Christian Wood will help when they're back, but they're not back right now. So for the time being, the Lakers got to play 9 guys, and that means playing one of Gabe or Max. And I think you could argue because D'Lo is now coming off the bench and playing backup point guard, I think you could argue that Max should be ahead of Gabe, but it's not pretty in either direction because both guys have really struggled offensively to the point of like almost being unplayable. But again, the Lakers have to play someone. They can't the back end. It'd be great if they had more options at the back end of the rotation, or it'd be great if Vando and Christian Wood were healthy, but that's not the case right now. So they're stuck with the options that they have, and that's got to be Gabe or Max in the rotation. And I kind of think it should be Max based on what we've seen from Gabe and just from a size perspective. I think already you saw it, like going from D'Lo to Cam. Obviously, Cam's a much better defender, but there's also just a size, athleticism, length component to changing the starting lineup. And for Max and Gabe have, again, both been ineffective offensively, but if we're just talking about who's more athletic, who's a better rebounder, who's a more switchable defender, who's a bit taller and stronger, it's Max. So I think I would lean Max over Gabe until Gabe starts to hit shots. Kane Norris, how concerned are you regarding AD's ongoing injury? So I talked about that as one of my 3 takeaways tonight. I am a little concerned. AD said he's going to continue to play through it, but it's something that he's going to have to manage and potentially affect how much he's practicing or like how much he's able to do in practice. So I am a little concerned. I think it's not just like the injury could be re-aggravated and be something that gets worse, but it could also lead to, I just said this before, but sometimes when you're dealing with one injury, you overcompensate physically in a different way. I tore my Achilles, and as I was dealing with that, I mean, that's an extreme example, but like just even learning to like walk and maybe talking about recovering from an injury is a little bit, or from like a injury and a surgery, whatever, it's different, but like still, it's just, even if you sprain your ankle a little bit and you start playing again, you're going to start to kind of lean a little bit on the other side until you feel like 100%. And this is like his foot heel area really hurting. It's something he's been dealing with since the summer. So every time you jump, every time, like in AD, I mean, there was a couple times today I thought he got injured with other stuff. Like he was holding his knee for one stretch. Like he got his shoulder ripped for a second. I thought it was like the Memphis game 1 where his shoulder popped out. So I was like, I mean, with AD, there's always kind of the looming threat of him suffering an injury. That's just how it is. But this is one that I am a little concerned about. But he played through it. He had a great game. He said he's going to continue to play and be fine. So we'll take him at that word. But this is not a fun injury. It's just a really annoying one because, again, you're doing so much running and jumping. That's what you do in basketball. And to have that on like the ball of your foot, heel of your foot, that's just constantly being aggravated. Dark Galaxy, would you want JJ to try out Koloko or Wood instead of Hayes? At this point, not Koloko. I don't think Koloko's ready, but I would be open to Wood. I think, especially from like, well, I mean, the Wood LeBron AD numbers were really good. I think any combination of just playing bigger in general, and Wood's actually statistically a better rim protector than Jackson Hayes. He's a better rebounder than Jackson Hayes, and he's a better shooter than Jackson Hayes. So he does give you that kind of stretch big, almost a 3-and-D center. I would say he's not great in space, and he could be blown by. He could be targeted. Did a good job on KD last year. So like he's had some good moments defensively. I don't think that's something you really want to rely on is like Christian Wood's wing defense. But if it's a guy, like the one thing with KD is KD's not that, like he's quick, but he's lost some of that speed and that burst. But KD's advantage is he's 7 foot, and I think AD said he's 7'2". Or that's what AD told me. And like he could just rise up over anybody. But Christian Wood's 6'11", so he can actually hang. Like KD's not necessarily blowing by him, and he could bother him with his length. So that's like actually a matchup where I like Christian Wood defending him because he's one of the few guys that, or at least on the Lakers, that's like big enough to contest and potentially bother KD a little bit. Of course, KD's KD, and like he's going to get 30 if he wants to get 30. But I would be open to Wood, and maybe they both play, right? And maybe it's Wood's the 9th man. The Lakers just go with a super big rotation, and Gabe and Max are out, and like they're playing some funky lineups, but they're kind of making up for the lack of foot speed and the lack of perimeter defense with extra size. And there's these jumbo front courts where Rui like never plays at the 4. LeBron rarely plays at the 4, and the 4-5 rotation is constantly AD, Hayes, Wood, maybe some LeBron in there, but then the 3 spot is Rui, LeBron, Vando. The 2 spot is I get Cam and Dalton, and maybe Rui or Vando, whoever's like technically the 2 in that lineup, and then the point guard spot is Austin and D'Lo, and you're going with that 9-man rotation, and I think that could work. So I'd be open to Wood. I think Hayes is not good defensively. That's the one problem, but I think he's been good as a DHO guy. He's been good as a finisher. And tonight he was good defensively. He did have 4 blocks, but I mean, this was, I should have mentioned this at some point. Like Philly was playing without Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, their 2 best players in my opinion, and that made this game a little easier offensively. But they had several guys that Jared McCain off the bench, Gershon Yabusele, KJ Martin. Obviously, Andre Drummond had like a throwback game where he was just killing the Lakers inside, drawing fouls. They could not guard him. Caleb Martin had double-digit points. So like Philly has some guys, they have some solid role players, but they were missing their two best players. So this was certainly an easier game for LA from that perspective. Would you trade Gabe, Max, Hood plus a second for Bruce Brown? I'd consider it. If you're keeping your first, I think that's important, especially if you can then use it. If the Lakers are willing to use it, then using it in a separate deal to upgrade the roster. I've said I'm keeping my Max stock, so like I don't love giving Max up in this deal, but if the Lakers are serious about winning now and going all in, I think this is the type of move that would help. And you still have D'Lo, you still have Vando. If you want to move either one of those guys, I still would probably do a separate D'Lo trade. But yeah, I mean, I don't love giving up Max. It's been 9 games. I still think I think Max is going to be fine long term, but he's 21. Let's give him a little bit of time. But to I see Sky Falcon making this point. Like, let's see what Bruce Brown had offseason knee surgery. That's always a scary thing. Lakers, Kendrick Nunn, Gabe Vincent, like knee issues. I mean, Christian Wood, got to be careful with knee issues. So I think Bruce Brown would have to return. But assuming Bruce Brown returns, is healthy and looks like himself. So I've got this one. Michael, do you agree with Embiid's suspension? Yes, but what I will say is the reporter's column was inappropriate, and he should not have brought up Joel Embiid's late younger brother and son. That was completely uncalled for, completely unnecessary. I don't even think it really made sense. Like, you could kind of see what he was trying to say, but it just didn't. I think there was a way to make that point without bringing up family, and especially a tragic situation with his younger brother dying, and then he names his son after him. So I totally understand. And I've had situations where players have confronted me. It's never gotten physical, but I totally think if you write something that a player is upset with, I've never written anything like that, to be clear, but if you write something, report something, say something, and a player's upset, I do believe that player has the right to come up to you, and even if they're want to cuss you out, yell at you, whatever, like that's totally fine. And typically the team will facilitate that, PR will facilitate that, and you guys can kind of hash it out, talk it out. So I'm all for that, and I think Embiid had every right to be upset. I just think this is like, it's a tricky thing, and I'm also coming at it from a media perspective, so I will admit I'm biased, but like this is a joint workspace, and while technically the players aren't our colleagues, it's like we're all agreeing to work in the same space. And I think a suspension was fair because I think if you flip it, right, like if let's say they get into this back and forth and the reporter pushes Embiid, I mean, one, he's at a major physical disadvantage, which is like its own thing of like the players are bigger, stronger than all the media, right? So like any type of player media confrontation, it's like the player has a major advantage in terms of like a physical potential altercation. But even taking that aside, like if a media member pushed a player, they'd be banned for life. They would lose their credential from the NBA. And I don't know about self-defense. Like if Embiid pushes him, then he pushes him back. Maybe the media member gets like the self-defense argument, and they're suspended for a week or a couple of weeks or whatever the NBA deems. But like if a media member just, you get into it with a player and you push them, you are going to be banned. I believe you'd be banned for life from attending NBA games as media, and potentially even attending NBA games, period. Like maybe that would be extreme. Maybe they'd still let you come in as a fan, but like I think they would revoke your credential and red flag you and mark you, and you'd never be allowed in. So if you think about like that sort of power dynamic in between a player and a media member, I mean, I don't know how tall Marcus Hayes is, but I would assume he's at least a foot shorter than Embiid, and at least 80, 100 pounds, if not more, less than him. So that dude pushes you. Like it's now, again, I understand where Embiid's coming from. I understand why it escalated to that point, and I think it was totally inappropriate. And I wouldn't be like, Embiid had every right to be upset and confront him. I just think, just like in any workspace, if you, and again, it's tricky because we're not technically colleagues with the players, but if you push someone at your workspace, you're going to have a penalty. And then, again, I think if it was reversed, the reporter would be banned. And so a 3-game suspension, well, for some that might seem like a lot. I feel like that's probably fair, just because it's like you are like, it's just there's an inequality there in terms of like media versus player, of like who has the power. Like the players have way more power in terms of a player could say, I don't want this person around, and like then you have to have a conversation with the team or with PR or whatever, because of that dynamic. And like the players just have way more power in terms of what they can do or say. And of course they're the product, and like I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that I think for a 7'1", 300-pound dude to push a reporter, while granted I understand where he's coming from, I do think there needs to be a penalty there, so that doesn't become commonplace. And it's like anytime a player gets upset about anything, and a lot of times players get upset about stuff that they didn't read the story, they didn't listen to the podcast clip, they didn't see the video clip, they get told it by a teammate, by a friend, by a family member, and then they get, it's like a game of telephone. They hear one version and then they get upset about it. And then oftentimes if you provide context, then they kind of get it, or they just let it go or whatever. So if it was just like free reign, hey, players can go push media members whenever if you don't like what they wrote, I think that would be problematic. So I do think it had to set a precedent of like, if you shove a media member, you're going to get some type of penalty. And again, I totally get where Embiid's coming from. I would have been tempted to do the same. I'm not going to lie. Like I probably would have done the same. So I think, but it doesn't absolve him from consequences. So I think two things can be true. I think what the reporter did was out of line, and he should potentially face some consequences, and maybe he is from the team or whatever. But I think there has to be that sort of just workplace respect of, we can cuss each other out, we could yell at each other, but I'm not going to put my hands on you, especially if I'm a foot taller than you and 100+ pounds more than you. And if this was the real world, I could easily, kick your ass, right? So, and I know that if you hit me back, you're facing way more it's just an uneven dynamic there. So that's my rant on the Joel Embiid thing. I know I've been asked this a couple times. I haven't gotten into it yet, but that's my unfiltered take. And I see, thank you, Big Baby, for saying, please hit the like button and subscribe. I'm seeing people are still arguing about Gabe, so I love the chat. Keep it going. But okay, I will do Lion King. Can we get Cam Thomas from Brooklyn? It doesn't seem like they want to give him up, from my understanding. I think it would be Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith, or Dennis Schroeder. So I think those would be the three guys that would be more likely to be available. I'm sure he's available for the right price, but he would be great as like the Lakers 6-man. I think that would be like Cam. I mean, he's in that, like he's in that, in my opinion, Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, like class of, in maybe even because of some of his physical gifts, could even be like a higher level than those guys. But I think obviously the defense it's gotten better, but it's still a bit of a problem. And he can go through phases where he's a bit of a chucker. So I think at the best version of him would be at best the third option on this team. And even with, I think Austin's still a better playmaker overall. So I think they'd probably want Cam as like more the fourth guy. And yeah, but I mean, he would be good if but the Nets do like him. Dark Galaxy, Jovan is a first round pick for Pirtle realistic? If so, would you do it? I think it's realistic. I don't, or maybe, yeah. I think it's probably the going price for Pirtle. I don't think I would do it. I think Pirtle has slipped the last couple of years. He also has 2 more years left at almost 20 million. It's a pretty big contract for a guy who I feel like is more of like a good backup center. Like I think there's a gap between Pirtle and Kessler, for example. I think Kessler could be. I mean, I just had it up, but how old is Walker Kessler? I think he's like 22, 23. Yeah, he's 23. So Walker Kessler, if you get Walker Kessler, he could be the Lakers starting center for the next 5 to 8 years. Or and I know I talked about him coming off the bench. So maybe for this season or whatever, he's coming off the bench, but eventually he grows into a starting role and it's him and AD, or maybe you just start him and you go him, AD, LeBron as the front court. And like Walker Kessler could be the center of the future. As just like kind of like that Ivica Zubats type. They're not the exact same player, but just like that sturdy, reliable starting center, double threat, good rim protector, efficient, low usage, low volume guy. So I think Walker Kessler, like that's more of an investment I view him as an investment for the present and the future, whereas Pirtle is more just a present guy. But even then, I think that contract was an overpay, and I think he slipped a bit. And like, I do like him defensively next to AD, and he does give you some of that similar Lopez Kessler. I think he's a worse rim protector than both of them. He's not as mobile as Kessler, probably more mobile than Lopez. Lopez is limited laterally, but Lopez is a better rim protector and shot blocker. So Pirtle's got some skill. He could pass. He's a dribble handoff guy, but I don't think he's worth the contract that he has. So I personally wouldn't do it, but maybe if that's the best you could do, maybe the Lakers just do it. So you guys are hilarious. OG Meatwad, are the rumors true about JHS or about the Jazz wanting JHS? I haven't heard that. I don't. I can't speak to that. Sky Falcon 5. Okay, this is going to be my last one. Thoughts on a D'Lo KCP swap? Kind of like D'Lo for the Magic, especially with Paolo out. I've heard Orlando, like they could have offered for D'Lo, and I think ultimately like they just favor, they have a type, and it's these long defensive minded, kind of scrappy guards and perimeter guys. So I think I agree with you, and I reported on it and had several people around the league say like Orlando and D'Lo makes sense, and if he leaves, like that would be the one team that would have made sense. But I don't think that ever really got traction. And I would do this if I'm the Lakers. I think you just put then KCP next to Austin. It's a perfect backcourt fit, and then you go with I guess Gabe, Dalton, Vando, and then one of the bigs as your 9-man rotation. So I like that. I wonder if you'd have to throw in a pick. That's an interesting part of this question. I would assume Orlando doesn't do this, and potentially even doesn't do it if you throw in a pick. Now I do think they could use a D'Lo type, but they seem to like high motor, long, athletic defensive guys. And D'Lo does not check. I guess he's long for his size, but or for his height and for a point guard spot, but he's not athletic. He doesn't have a high motor, and he's not a good defender. So, but that's it. I'm going to wrap here. I appreciate you all so much for hanging with me on this Friday night. Now Saturday morning, at least for us on the West Coast. But I will be back on Sunday night. I will also be at Bronny's debut tomorrow, so I might take some footage from that and be posting that. I also have a vlog coming out either tomorrow or Sunday from the road trip, and behind the scenes on the road trip. We'll show you guys what it's like to go on the road, and just all of the flights and the hotels and the games and all the different stuff I did on the road. So be on the lookout for that. But I appreciate you guys again for rocking with me on a Friday night. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Again, I'll be back throughout the weekend, at least a couple times. But for sure, Sunday night after the Lakers-Raptors game, I will talk to you soon.